Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you about painting miniatures and everything about them. Yes. And this is part 31. Yes, I can't believe we're already at part 31. Eyes, specifically human eyes and animal eyes. So a wise man once said that eyes are the windows to the soul. And likewise, eyes are also the window to the thoughts and the character and the direction of a miniature. By painting the eyes correctly, you give the character emotion, you give them a direction since you're typically looking at where you want to go and what you want to deal with. So they're very important. And to paint them, it typically requires a very steady hand. And number two, knowledge of where your brush tip is touching. You have to be very precise with your movement of your brush. And for these reasons, it typically gets neglected when you're painting it to a tabletop standard. So today we're going to discuss how to paint eyes effectively. So first, what brushes do you need if you want to paint eyes on a miniature? The answer is something with a very fine tip. So you can either A, go with, this 00, extreme detail brush. If you have one, they're great by Winsor Newton, or you can just go with one with a very fine tip. And this is where those really nice sable brushes come in handy because they tend to have a very nice point, such as this old GW brush, and it's made of sable and it has a very nice tip. So today I'm going to use both of them in different miniatures. And second, when painting eyes, it's good to have a very good proper posture. So as you can see here, I'm going to move very close to the table, and what I do is I like to prop up my elbows on the table, and this will give a lot of strength to my wrists and will let me have very precise and even movements without too much wobbling on my hands. And second, you're going to notice that I hold the miniature very close to my face. That's also a great recommended step since you need to be able to see the eyes properly to paint them, and I'm holding it under a light so I can see all the very nice detail. So we're going to be painting eyes on this cyborg. You can probably see it from my dry brushing tutorial, and we'll also be painting eyes on a cultist from my skin tutorial. And today, whites, basically eyes are pretty simple. You have a white for the eyes and a color for the pupils. And I like to use gray liner. If you don't have gray liner, I recommend maybe a dark gray or a black because they tend to show up the nicest. And this next thing I recommend when using whites is you gotta thin down your whites. You don't want them to be too thick. You don't want them to obscure the detail and go on gunky or really thick onto the pupil. You want a thinned down white. So we're gonna thin it down with some thinner and get it to a very nice consistency. Because that's the key when you apply the first layer. You don't want it to obscure any details. You don't want it to go on too clunky and to show brush strokes because that tends to remove from the awesomeness of the eyes. And as you can see here, I'm going to use my fine detail brush, and I'm not going to load it with much paint. I'm just going to quickly put it into the paint and remove a lot of the excess because you don't want to put on too much white onto the miniature. That being said, if you happen to put too much on, white is the easiest color to cover up, so you can always go over after with the skin tone or the fur tone and fix it. So let's zoom in here, and as you can see, the key to this is to very careful, steady hand, and once you are able to touch the surface of the eye with your brush, you can figure out exactly where your brush head is touching. And then from then on, all I do is slowly adjust my brush strokes to the direction I want to fill. And just dot by dot fill in the eye. So the key is first figure out where it's touching, and second then move your brush towards the rest of the eye. And there you go. Now the first eye is completely painted white and it looks great. Didn't take me very long. As I said, it's good to prop up your arms so that way you support your arms and are easily able to paint in the surfaces with not too much wobbliness. You have to have a very steady hand. And I do the same thing with the cyborg. I start with a point, and this time I'm using my Citadel brush. And after the first brush stroke, I know exactly where my paint is touching, and I just adjust my brush stroke towards the direction of the rest of the eye, a little bit at a time. Basically, I'm almost painting a dot at a time. And very quickly and carefully, you can see now I filled in the other eye, and now the white is easily be able to see, and I stayed entirely within the confounds of the eye, and that's great. If I made a mistake, I can easily fix it later by going over the fur or skin colors. So now we're going to take our pupil color. I'm going to use gray liner. It's a really nice matte dark gray from Reaper. And I'm going to add to my palette. I don't need to thin it down because Reaper paints are very thin, but if you are using a thicker paint, I recommend thinning it down. And once again, when loading my brush, I'm not going to load too much paint on it, just enough on the tip, because essentially for the cultist, all I'm doing is a tiniest dot. So once again, this requires a lot of practice to know exactly where your brush is hitting, but all I'm going to do is put a tiniest dot in the far right corner of his eye because it does look like from the body position that he is facing, and he's looking towards his own right, based on how he's holding the knife. So I'm going to put a far dot in the far right to make it continuously look like he is facing that direction. And ultimately, I'm just giving the character now a feel, because now you can see he's clearly facing the right-hand side, and he's looking over there with his knife about to stab something in anger. So the cultist now has a little bit more character, and definitely gives some thought to the character. And then same with the cyborg. Let's zoom in here. So with him, I'm going to show you two different techniques. Now with larger eyes, such as on this beast, or on any animals, you can also do this with humans as well, with the ones with larger eyes. Rather than a single dot, dots tend to look like they have a kind of a staring issue. What I recommend doing is doing a line, and you'll see what I'm doing. So I'll start off with a dot just to show you how it looks. So I'm just going to put a dot in the lower part of the eye, just so that it is looking downwards. So once again, I start by putting a little dot and figuring out where my brush is, and then just going a little bit at a time to fill in that larger circle of the pupil. Taking my time, very small, steady brush strokes. A little bit at a time. This is in real time, so you can see how slow I'm going. And now he's looking downwards. So as you can see, that's with the dot, and he looks good to begin with, but it does kind of give him a staring issue, kind of has a staring problem. So with larger eyes, such as on beasts like these, it's a good idea to actually continue it and do a line down the eye. You can do this with humans, as I mentioned as well, but it's easier with beasts. So now I'm just going to continue that exact line upwards towards the top part of the eye until I'm done, a nice solid line. And I'm going to take my time, very smooth, steady brush strokes, and this will come with time. The more practice you do with eyes, the better that they will turn out. And you just need to know exactly where your brush is touching, because that's the key, ultimately. It's very hard to put a brush to a small thing like an eye. And second, just practicing your smooth brush strokes upwards. And now here he goes. So now the line is complete, and now you can see he has much less of a staring issue, and it looks much more realistic, I find. Like, it gives him some thought. Obviously now he's looking forward, but it does look a little bit more realistic and a little bit better than the single dot. And as I said, you can choose either to do the line or the dots on, if you do humans or beasts. I just find with animals especially, it's important to do the lines. And he's done. And that's it. So now we have a cyborg that's clearly looking forward, and a cultist that is clearly looking to the right. And that's it about eyes. So just remember to prop up your arms to get very strong, steady movement of your arms, and not a lot of wobbliness. Take your time and do very precise brush strokes, and just practice. And that's all you need to do with eyes. So thank you so much for watching this part of Miniature Painting 101. And stay tuned for part 32, which is just around the corner, next Monday as always. But if you can't wait for next part, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only will you get to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes, you also get to see tons of start to finish painting tutorials, battle reports, and just some awesome wargaming content. So please go check it out. And thank you very much for watching this episode. Till next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.